Our analysis of Wilfred Owen's Anthem for Doomed Youth rests in the interpretation that we have created, that it is a poem that protests against the meaninglessness of war. It laments on the loss of soldiers' lives. It highlights the carnage and the horrors of war. There you go. So in this annotated page, we have summarized those meanings that we have identified, and it's written here at the top, so it guides us in our analysis, looking at signs and evidence of those meanings. How did we achieve those meanings? So you go through line by line and identifying the language features, the figurative language in each line, as well as the aesthetic features in them, which contribute to the understanding and the overall interpretation of the poem, which becomes a thesis. So because there are 14 lines in this poem, we have identified so many language features in those lines, and it's also helpful that when you annotate a poem, you will write down the numbers in each line in order to refer to which line you are discussing. This will guide you through your analysis. So, here are the things that we have found, the language features and the aesthetic devices in the poem, for us to have achieved that interpretation. What passing bells for these who die as cattle, says the first line. And in this first line, we have identified the use of vocabulary. Passing bells, they are the sort of bells used to announce someone's death. So that alone gives us an indication of the setting of the poem, or the topic of the poem, that it is about death. But as you read further, you will notice the use of as. So the language features that use as are like. That will remind us of simile and metaphor using comparisons. Someone's asking as well. There is the use of persona. It may not be the poet asking this question. Instead, the poet uses a character in the poem to play out a particular role to help highlight or communicate his ideas. So here there's someone, a persona, asking a question about the passing bells. Where are those that are used to signify or to announce the death of people? And these people are compared to animals. They die like animals. Where? In war? How? We don't know. We have to keep on reading. But there is an indication here with the use of simile that they die as cattle. Does not remind you of slaughtering a cattle? Animals dying in slaughterhouses, and the carnage and the horror that may be depicted by that imagery. Line number 2, only monstrous anger of the guns. We see personification here. The guns are angry, monstrously. It creates that imagery of violence, that imagery of destructiveness, or the imagery of intense emotion. Guns. And only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle. Rifle stuttering is also use of personification. And notice the use of R in these 3 words repeatedly. Rifle's rapid rattle. The alliteration in them recreates or mimics that sound that you hear in war, the violence that it depicts, the shelling and the wailing of the gun, which comes more evident later on. Then also the use of the word patter out, the mumbling of the orisons, the prayers. The orisons refer to prayers that are said hastily in war, because of course it's in a situation where you don't have the time to reverently hold the funeral for the person. So how is this being done in trenches when someone's dying there? There is therefore the hasty and the hurried ways where prayers are said. But how is that done? Also the use of orisons. Prayers are not really sort of mumbled like that. It should be said reverently, but there is that sort of sarcastic tone to the use of orisons and pattering outs. Ironic depiction of irreverence of prayers in a funeral. Normal funeral is absent in the field. No more irreverence there, no mockeries now for them because they have to be interned hurriedly in the field, in the trenches. No prayers, no bells. So there's the observation of the absence of items from a normal funeral, nor any voice of mourning, save the choirs. This also, it projects the absence of normal funeral service. It portrays the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells. Again, personification where shells are wailing. And this explicit and emotive use of the word of shrill, you can easily hear the shelling and the use of guns in war. It portrays chaos, schizophrenic, horrific kind of mood that it projects. The bugles call it, again, personification where bugles calling for them from sad shires. Personification, alliteration here rather, sad shires. It heightens the description of sadness, where bugles normally are used in a funeral to create music and to invite people to prayer for the funeral or interment of someone. But here they're calling in a sad tone. Moving on to line 9 to 14. In line 9, there's also the observation of candles are absent. What candles may be held to speed them all? Again, it repeats the questioning mode of the persona there. What candles then are used for them when they die in the trenches? There are no more candles, I suppose. But the author has provided a solution to that. Not in the hands of the boys, but in their eyes. Where can you find the candles? In the glimmering eyes of those boys. Their comrades may be looking at them, or other soldiers dying beside them, shining. Again, the alliteration there, shall shine, glimmers of goodbye. Repeated alliteration, it heightens the striking imagery of death in a horrific way. And there's no more cloth to cover them, as you would in a normal funeral where flags of nation are used. Instead, what we see or what we imagine or the author proposes would be the pallor of girls' brows. They are reminiscent, or they connect to the image of photographs that the soldiers carry with them wherever they are assigned in war. So as they die, then I suppose they are being used as pallor, or covering of their bodies, of those photographs of their parents and loved ones that they carry wherever they go. It has that sort of flattened surface, I suppose, that can be still used connectively, like the imagery projected by the covering of the pall, but the photographs this time. There's no more flowers there in the trenches. Instead, the flowers used are the tenderness, the patient minds of their family members who are waiting for them to return, but now never to occur. So that's the metaphor there that Owen is proposing. But for me, line 14 lies the striking image of metaphor, the conceit of the poem. And each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. It connotes, the word drawing down, it connotes the curtain that's being used at a show, like a stage show. If it is a stage show, perhaps the soldiers are the actors and their death is the end of the show. Well, I suppose it is a show because it's a performance of obedience to authorities or state or government officials who tell them to go to war. The patriotism and the obedience that they project there signifies the onset of the show, and then it draws down, it ends with the drawing of the curtains, which then ties up with the overall meaning of the poem, that war is just resulting to the meaningless waste of soldiers' lives. So from that annotated page, I have written an essay, not too long, I suppose, for this YouTube presentation.
An analysis of Wilfred Owen's Anthem for Doomed Youth. Wilfred Owen's 1917 poem, Anthem for Doomed Youth, laments the loss of young soldiers in war. As it protests against the inhumane results of war and illustrates the carnage it brings to the soldiers, it ironically compares the funeral of those who die in a war with those interned in the church. To begin with, the first line's use of the words passing bell, the kind of bell that announces the funeral of someone, sets the somber tone of the poem. Line 1 shows a persona who questions and laments the absence of passing bells for those who die in war. This questioning provides a setting for the poem. In war, soldiers die as cattle. This questioning emotively highlights the simile. The soldiers are compared to animals slaughtered in the field. They are dead as cattle. Stark imagery that shocks the audience on the carnage soldiers or fighters go through in war. The persona in the poem continues to make comments about the death of the soldiers denied of proper religious prayers given in church. Instead, these soldiers are given horrific treatment. They receive monstrous anger of the guns and stuttering rapid rifles in war. These soldiers have missed the appropriate requiem reverently offered to those in church. Instead, metaphorically, they get the hurried prayers, sarcastically termed orisons. Moreover, in these hurried prayers, the guns are personified. They are monstrously angry, carrying more emotional punches to the sad situation. Not only that the guns are violently personified, they're also onomatopoeic because of the deafening sound they realistically make. The alliteration in the rifle's rapid rattle adds impact to that terrifying sound, bringing to the page the bewildering, chaotic, schizophrenic mood created by the firing and shelling of the guns during the war. Furthermore, not only do the dying and the dead soldiers in war only get heard prayers, but lines 5 to 8 exacerbate the lamentations by the absence of the usual interment elements, such as reverent prayers, bells, choirs, voices of mourning, bugles, peoples. Instead, the persona identifies heart-wrenching equivalents. The shrilling and shelling of the guns become the serious prayers, the bells, the demented choirs, the bugles, and the voices of the mourners all at once. These metaphors, onomatopoeia, and personifications illustrate the heartbreaking reality of soldiers losing their lives in war. The demented and nihilistic nature of war is accentuated through more poignant metaphors and imagery in lines 9 to 14. Instead of having candles that mourners hold up as they say goodbye to the dead during an interment at church, the persona identifies the eyes of the boys bestowing glimmers of goodbye to their dying comrades. Instead of the flag or cloth of honor that the state rewards for the hero soldier, the dead soldier gets pallor of girls, the faded photographs of loved ones, girlfriends, wives, or children that the soldiers carry with them in the trenches now placed over their dead body. Instead of the flowers that the family offers to the dead, the soldier dying in the trenches has the patience and time spent by the family as they wait for their return, which will never occur. This striking imagery carries heart-rending tones that trumpet the sad reality of war. Perhaps the most striking metaphor and imagery in Owen's protest are found in the 14th line of his poem. The term drawing down of blinds connotes the drawing of the curtain, slowly done as the actor passes away, his performance comes to an end. The slow dusk connotes the gradual dimming of the lights at the show's end. These imageries showcase the conceit of the sonnet that all the kerfuffle the war makes, it is only an exercise of obedience to authorities, an effort that eventually ends in a meaning